When we gathered at this time last year, I remember reflecting on the fact that "at least" was a refrain we were hearing a lot near the start of the pandemic, and that instead of one of the most glorious masses that we celebrate every year here in the main chapel, we were reduced to saying, "at least we can do something." And I remember thinking to myself at that time, boy, won't it be great a year from now? This place will be packed, hopefully the weather will be wonderful, and all of this will be in the rearview mirror. And obviously that's not the case. And I've learned to be humble enough not to make any guesses about a year from now, though I certainly hope we will be all back together physically in this space. But it's given me, and I think a lot of people all around the world, an opportunity to reflect on the notion of time. When we all went into this now well over a year ago, it'd only be natural that we had in the back of our minds a sense of, well, what will it be like next year? I can't wait until next year. Then round about the end of the year, well, maybe by summer, what will it look like then? And now you still hear that question, and we're antsy and we're wrestling, and certainly in our churches, we're wondering what will it be like when once again we can be together in our fullness as we've gone through a second Easter. Well, as you can see next to me, and as many of you will see in your churches in this Easter season, it's the wonderful Paschal candle, that giant candle that they first unveil at the Easter Vigil every year. And that candle has such significance, as you know, but I just want us to remind ourselves of it for a moment. That candle is lit at all the significant moments in the sacramental life of the church. It's lit for baptisms, it's lit for funerals, all those benchmark moments in the course of a Christian life. But it's also the marker of time. And as we gather on this day to remember, to think about, not just what happened in the past, but the glorious presence of Our Lady, I invite you to think about her maycrowning through the lens of the passage of time. And I'm referencing the Paschal candle because if you're in a parish, it's not so much here at the seminary, we don't celebrate baptisms or funerals here, but in your parishes, you can literally measure time, not by the clock, but by the size of that candle. And some parishes are busier than others. Some do lots of baptisms every Sunday, others maybe only a couple a month. But every time that candle is brought out and it's lit, for little babies at the start of lives, for coffins, for the elderly who've lived full lives, and for everything in between, that candle gets just a little bit shorter. And it's a powerful reminder as it gets shorter and time passes that there is life in all its glory. Because for we, of course, as people of God, whether it's the baptism of a baby or the funeral of a person at the end of 80 or 90 years, it's all about life. And what happens in the in-between time? As I think about Mary in the gospel today, that's what comes to mind. She's there, of course, with John. She's looking up at her son. He's right on the verge of breathing his last. And he says, "Behold," that's the word. "Behold your son. Behold your mother." It always starts with an encounter, with a beholding, and it ends with a response. And in between those two is a sacred space. And I'd like to suggest that that is where the Christian spiritual life, at least on this earth, is lived out. It's lived out in that sacred space between the encounter, the beholding, and the response. What you see in the case of the beloved disciple is a decision that he's going to heed the words of our Lord. He's going to take on Mary as his mother. But there's been an incredible transformation. It's not simply take care of this woman because she's going to need help. She's now without her son. Of course, it's so much more than that. It's a very shift in his identity. But that shift is the result of a free choice. Between the beholding and the response is a time of decision. And as a little spiritual exercise, maybe on this day that we celebrate the crowning of the Mother of our Lord, is to think about the ways she's modeled that freedom and the choice that lives in that sacred space. Think about the moment of the Annunciation, the encounter with the angel Gabriel. Ultimately, there is a response, of course. Let it be done unto me according to thy will. But it's that sacred space in between. She had freedom. She had freedom to say no. She had freedom to say, let me think about it a little bit. Get back to me next week. She had freedom to do anything. And in the sacredness of that time, not with total certitude about how her life would unfold, but in the sacredness of that time, in the freedom, she was able to embrace the uncertainty. She was able to grow in trust. She was able to grow in love. But that's what happens in that sacred space. Between the lighting of the Paschal candle for the baptism of a newborn baby to the lighting of the Paschal candle for the funeral of a senior citizen, in the sacredness of life is freedom for choice. And so as we gather today, now virtually, I won't make any predictions for a year from now, but boy, I know what I want. But as we gather now, in this time, simply to take a cue from the Blessed Mother and to recognize that when she is most properly queen, it's precisely there at the foot of her dying Son on the cross, because that time and that space is made sacred by the freedom which lives in that moment. And sometimes it is precisely in the moment of greatest struggle that we're called upon to extend ourselves with the greatest trust. And so my prayer for all of us is that wherever we find ourselves in that sacred space between the beholding of our Lord and the moment of response, whatever that looks like for you in your family, in your relationships, in your job, as you're contemplating your own health, as we think about this world in the midst of a global struggle, wherever we are in that sacred space, that we might make the same choice Mary herself did, as did the beloved disciple, to allow ourselves to be transformed, to grow in trust, and to grow in love. You only get that sacred space and that sacred moment once. So make your choice in freedom and make it well.